back to the agenda at hand. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angie. We'll give a few more minutes and we will convene and get started back. Yes. So we can we get started. This is Mayor Council discussion based on the presentations that were made to us this morning. And we check to see, is Chris still on? WB? Chris? Councilwoman Miller?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Councilman WB Bullock? I see his name, I know whether he was on. Okay. He's on mute, okay. At this time, we will open up for our discussion for the mayor and council on this morning sessions.
I don't know if I have much of discussion really, but I do think I like the fact that we've got a little bit of overview and some work has been put towards this. I think though, once we talk about the numbers we're talking about, we really need to study and to figure out where things are going to be placed, where we're targeting. And I do think it's the entire community, the entire city of Rocky Mount. And I think it's hard to say is, you know, the numbers that we're looking at, 25 and 50 million. To me, with the knowledge I have right now, it's hard to pinpoint that because I don't know, with construction costs the way they are and the need that's in our community, you know, I think we need to put more into the research and the study of it before we look at going to the bond, avenue. This is a lot to absorb, and that's just some of my concern that do we need to put a little more study into it, and can it be done concurrently? I don't know that. It could be. I don't know. So, but I would hate to go out there and say we're going to do X number of dollars, and then either we find out that it really doesn't scratch the surface, or it's too much, or what. I don't know. I do. And I'll repeat myself, the general obligation bond, when we start talking about that, is something that that appeals to me. If we start looking at other avenues, that would be very difficult for me to get behind, because I do think with the amount of dollars that we're looking at, the community needs to have a say-so. Initially, right now, they're my thoughts, just the initial thoughts, but it's a lot to absorb, just right now. So,
Yeah, can I respond? Because
Sure.
I want to make sure that we are clear. Myself and the staff is not asking for a confirmation of any amount of the bond at this time. The information presented today was just to give you some background, and then for you to give us some direction if you would like for us to move forward in our research to come back and answer the more specific questions. So want to make sure that we're not talking about a 15 million or 25 million or 50 million bond at this time. Amy's presentation was just to give you a reference and to be an example of what that could look like. So I know that the public is viewing, so we don't want to send the message that the council is contemplating any level of bond at this particular time. And as I had said even earlier, that this is just to sort of put our toe in the water, get some general guidance, if you will, from the council, because if there's no interest in a bond, then we certainly don't want to spend the staff's time going through the many stages of research and preparation and communicating back with the council. So that was the intent of presenting the information to you today.
and I appreciate that. I guess part of the presentation is actually one of my earlier questions, and when I was referring to the maintenance of housing, and then we were talking about the comment about the urgency. So I appreciate your comments right there. That clarifies. But I think it's certainly worthy from my standpoint. It's certainly worthy from doing some further research. And again, I know that there's been a lot of focus and a lot of talk about the parts of the community that historically have been, I guess, overlooked. But also, I would dare say that Rocky Mount as a whole is an older community, and we need to look, if we're going to look at something like this, again, all of Rocky Mount.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell.
Yes. So I would have a follow-up question to you, Mr. Doctor, if you don't mind. When you say all of Rocky Mount, what does that mean? I'm not certain I grasp that.
Exactly what I said. Wards 1 through 7. Right now, a lot of the money that we're focusing on downtown, a lot of the money's been put in the event center, and we're focusing that area, which is, I understand, but we also need to focus on the entire city, because when we also talk about, because further back in here, we're talking about infrastructure in the road, but housing all over Rocky Mount. We've got issues all over.
I'm in agreement with that. So you're saying then, or are you saying that you support affordable housing throughout the entire city in every ward?
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
Yes.
So you're saying if we were able, and I am in full support of a bond referendum. I'm in full support of a transformative bond, and I'm in full support of a bond that would spread affordable housing opportunities throughout every ward in this city. I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Well,
And so I just like to state my place.
Yes.
We got plenty of research. We've done years of documentation, years of study. We have numbers coming in from almost multiple entities that tell us the same story, is that our housing market is very tight. It's very difficult for people to find decent and affordable homes, especially at the lower end of a spectrum from a renter as well as an owner perspective. And we also have a hot real estate market. And my caution is that in the next several years, it's going to tighten up even more, and without having tools and resources to enable fragile communities and fragile households, marginalized households, I would hope that we would find multiple ways to address those concerns. And I just don't know how we can do it dribbling, the funds as we're doing now. What I really liked about Asheville's perspective, but it took time, I understand, to pull other development partners to the table. But this is a different community, very different. I like the tools, but the application of the tools, I think we have to approach in a different manner. To have, say, an acre is worth $2 million, that immediately limits, in anybody's market, who can participate in development. And I'm very concerned that if we take so much time before we get moving forward on the implementation cycle, Madam Manager, we will find our economy is even tighter. I'm convinced Rocky Mount is the hottest place in North Carolina. I don't know how anybody could not see that for a small city our size. When I drive through your ward in particular, I see nothing but prosperity, except for Little Eastonburg, which is a great opportunity for some beautiful housing opportunities there. I see these trailer parks that have existed in our city that we have not done anything related to regulation or transformation about, and people live there because they don't have other options that are affordable to them. And that's another reason I feel that we've got to move in a transformative manner. And housing, as was stated yesterday, is economic development. And to not invest in economic development means you can't get a return off of it. So we cannot have an expectation of return from marginalized communities if we don't invest in marginalized communities. So I'm very eager, and I will be very aggressive in communicating to the public, from my perspective, that we need to do this sooner than later. And whatever option that it takes to bring affordable housing, both rental and home ownership and renovation, I think we should do. And I agree with Councilman Daughtry, it should be transformative across this entire city so that we don't have certain communities that are specializing only in certain types of housing. In wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, there are not options for higher income homes and communities. There are no options. There's no new development, and it's a market-driven economy. So nobody can say, I didn't have a chance to build something over there. It's a market economy. People can buy whatever they want to buy. They can build wherever they want to build. We have not told people you can't build here, you can't build it. That's what the market has chosen to do. And as the largest investor in marginalized communities in our city, I feel it is irresponsible not to move quickly and with dedication and with intent on determining what we can do. Now, what I feel is that we need the guidance of our staff, which I think Amy has sort of set the boundaries. She said 25 to 50 million, about what our existing budget can afford. Then it's up to this council to determine in talking with our constituents and determining what's our appetite. What is our vision? We know we need housing, but like I said, how many units are we talking about? Asheville could say, we have X number of units and we have X number of projects throughout the area. So perhaps a better definition of that so that we can see what we're buying into will help us perhaps with solidifying this vision of what a better Rocky Mount would be with more opportunities.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, what I'm concerned about is that the need is much greater than our ability to pay for it, right? And that's not just housing, that's other infrastructural issues, economic development. And so, and I understand the need and desire to move post haste. Oh my God, I'm just talking. But I understand the need to move post haste. But I mean, if we just took, we have right here, it says 22,000 households. I'm assuming those are housing units. Only 5% of that's roughly 1,000 units. If you have $115 a square foot to develop, which is basically what it costs to redevelop, 1,000 square foot being average, I mean, that's a $100 million need, and that only covers 5% of what our current inventory is. And then we have other issues. And so I would like to see us come up with, I know we can't come up with a very detailed plan, but at least a straw man to be able to understand what it is that we're trying to achieve and put some raw numbers to it to try to develop partnerships within our community, whatever that may look like, so that we can leverage both the private sector as well as what we're trying to achieve as a community, as a city. And I just think that's an important thing for us to consider. I would hate for us to use the totality of our dry powder or our ability to, receive credit and then find out we have another need going forward, in 2 years or 3 years. That's a critical issue as well. And so that's all I want to say. Now, I think that Madam Manager, your team put together a great, amount of information. I think it's been informative. I think clearly we have a need amongst other needs. I think this is certainly a top tier priority. But again, I think looking at it from a holistic standpoint would be to the benefit of our community in a way that we can manage it, control it, and roll it out. And to Councilman Blackwell's point, make it meaningful to the community and the development that we're trying to achieve. We don't short ourselves.
Thank you, man.
Well, I'm just jumping in because I didn't hear the whole conversation, but just listening to Councilmember Daughtry and Councilmember Blackwell, now the mayor, when you say you support a housing bond for all of Rocky Mount, I understand that. I think we all supported a bond for all of Rocky Mount because we represent all the citizens in Rocky Mount. But if we're going to really look at the information that we already have attained in the housing study in the 14 underserved communities, I mean, it's just like now, people say Black Lives Matter. So people want to shift the narrative to all lives matter, which all lives do matter. But until you recognize Black Lives Matter, then how are you going to appreciate all lives matter? And I'm saying that because when you look at historically African-American communities, which are in Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4, South Rocky Mount, Little Raleigh, across town, Joiners Hill, Hillsdale, and you see the poor housing stock and less investment of city dollars intentionally, I would say, in past administration and past leadership, elected official, when we had the white flight to leave Rocky Mount and we built westward. No infrastructure put in these communities, which made our community desirable to have private investors to come in and build. Even our schools that were in those communities are no longer there, which were the anchor of our communities. So when we look at this housing bond and we look at historically what has been done in our community, at the beginning of the retreat, I think the city manager said the council had a meeting, learning how to trust each other and appreciate each other. Until we understand our community and trust each other, it's going to be hard to agree, all 7 of us, to move forward. And I'm from Rocky Mount, and you are from Rocky Mount, and you are too, and TJ, you're on the outskirts. So we know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if we're going to be a progressive elected body, then we have to own up to the good, the bad, and the ugly. When you ride through certain wards, you don't see the poor housing stock like you see in Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4. We had an aggressive demolition with community code, which the budget was about $60,000, and in 2003 we increased it to $250,000 because we heard the outcry of our community about boarded up houses. Now that we have taken an aggressive approach and demolished a lot of these houses, now you see most of these wards, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are a lot of vacant properties. And if we continue down that road, you won't have a South Rocky Mount or Little Raleigh. If you just look around Buck Leonard Park, on Clyde Street, Peter Street, Center Street, I mean, just houses just been totally wiped out. And so what I'm saying, that we have to look at what has been neglected, underserved, underfunded, redlined, and intentionally not funding communities in Rocky Mount has put us in this predicament where we are now, that it's going to take us today to fix some of the stuff that should have been fixed 40 years ago, 30 years ago, even before that. And so I understand when you say all of Rocky Mount, but I'm talking about let's invest in those areas that have not had the investment in the last 40, 50 years, like the western part of our city. And so when we look at Asheville, it's a totally different population, and we have to tailor this bond to our needs in Rocky Mount. And so I don't think we need to have any more studies. City Manager, I'm quite sure you have heard us loud and clear, the clarion call, and we've been saying it for years. We want a housing bond. And to direct Amy Staten and her staff to come back and give us the options of, do we want a general obligation bond, a limited obligation bond, or a special obligation bond? And then we decide on, as a council, how we're going to do the bond. But to me, continue to talk about it. I know it's going to take some time, but we've been talking about it for a very long time. We even was talking about it during the time of the event center. But we also understood, Councilman Daughtry, that before doing the housing bond, we wanted to spur economic development in our downtown area. And downtown include all of Rocky Mount, not just the Edgecombe side, but it's all of Rocky Mount. Because if you have a dying or dead downtown, which is 2 blocks from your city hall, that speaks volumes about your people and about your city. And so we was hoping that would spur economic development for those surrounding communities, which are wards 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because traditionally that was Rocky Mount until we grew westward. And so to me, I think we've done the right thing in our downtown, and it has brought about a transformational change in Rocky Mount. And also we have delegates from the academy that has been working diligently to help us pull this together and to help city officials to recognize the issues that they see as well that they want us to address. And I appreciate all the delegates being here from different communities to witness this conversation, this retreat, and also have an input. But again, the housing bond, yes, for all of Rocky Mount, but if we don't invest in those communities who have not been invested in for such a long time and change the landscape, but yet still don't displace and allow gentrification, then we're going to be like other communities. And that's not good. And with the foreclosure piece, I'm just hope that we will have a good plan that it does not bring about gentrification and displace people who have been in those communities from generation to generation. I was just speaking to Ms. Mary Warren. She's been fighting for a long time, not only just Ms. Warren, but when you look at that community, the stakeholders are asking for investment, housing, because those communities in those particular wards want to look like the rest of Rocky Mount. And so that's my take on that.
Thank you, Councilman Knight. Councilman Walker.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that, Councilman Knight. And I think to help move us closer to that direction, if we could identify, we've already had the study showing those 14 underserved communities. If we could identify where the housing projects need to take place, how many units we need, a more specific and detailed plan, I think that would help us determine, and even in wards, the other wards that aren't underserved, but if we were to have a more detailed and intensified plan that shows what projects we need, where we need them, how many units we need, I think that will help us determine what type of bond we need to try to approach, because I don't know, just from hearing today, I don't know if, us just going out and saying, all right, this is the bond we want, but not really having a detailed plan out of how we're going to utilize the bond. I don't know if that's like saying, okay, we have the money, but then, now what are we going to do with it? Are we going to plan after we have the funds, or would we want to look at how we utilize that now in a more detailed and intensified plan? And then we approach and know exactly how much funding we need. That's just, my perspective on how I feel we should move toward this and move expeditiously on it. I think if the studies are already done, it shouldn't take us long to say we need X amount of projects in these areas, and we need these amount of specific units in these areas. That way we'll have an idea when we're working with the bond, we're working with private, public partnership, however the partnerships have to work. Everybody knows then how much we have to work with what we're trying to accomplish. And that's just my perspective.
Thank you, Councilman Walker.
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about these studies, and what I heard is they were dated, and I've asked for an inventory. Do we have those things? Because I think you're right. I mean, it starts with where's the need and what is the need? And so, I'll echo that. So, but if there's a study, I sure would like to see it so I could be at least participating in the same conversation as everybody.
Okay. Can I address that?
Yes.
So we did, let me see, former Mayor David Combs and I chaired a housing task force, had to be 12 years ago, had to be. A report was generated from that session. The DFI team inventory the need. They did all of Rocky Mount statistics and inventory exactly how many units we were in the deficit. That's that documentation.
What was it? I know it's old.
I don't-
But I bet you it hadn't changed much.
Well, it probably hasn't.
Yeah.
I don't have
Okay,
that
all right,
detail.
okay.
I'm just telling you, if people need to know to go where to look,
Okay.
I'll give you some information about where to look. And
Okay.
then our team should be able to produce that. And then that study that documented, that we led, that documented the need of those 14 communities that Councilman Walker initiated, that was another study. 14 communities, they had it mapped out, laid out. And then this last information that was in our memo, the cover letter, actually said we have X number of units in Rocky Mount that have dilapidated, deteriorated, and substandard housing. So the data is there. You know, the question is, what are we going to do with it? You know, and so I'm thinking that we're at a place now where we got motivated partners. We have 2 counties that have the same needs that we have. We have the Rocky Mount Housing Authority that's under your leadership, which they are phenomenal. I mean, you got a great team, you know, that works with that group that has documented need as well. You have Rocky Mount Edgecombe CDC. You got the Community Academy that has produced information, documentation. Several of the members are here with us today. We have scores and tons of information. Perhaps the conversation, Ms. Manager, is can it all be compiled, data crunched, maps given, the outline presented, because we do not have to start all over again. We have the information. We have it articulated, we got it outlined, we got it mapped. But what I do hear is that we need to specifically indicate what is the staff's vision, and then we need to bring that vision to our communities. We got neighborhoods that are meeting, they're working with us on a regular basis, you know. So can you design a process?
Certainly, and I think that was the point and the intent of probably seeking the assistance of some of these interns to help us gather that, because we have information in so many different places, and it's not connected.
Right.
And even more important, it probably needs updating as well. So the intent would be to come back with a full scale. Here's what the problem is. This is the identified problem, and then here are the steps to help us mitigate that. And I can also foresee giving the council options as to how to address it. You know, this is really a long-term journey. I don't think any one bond is going to, you know, magically correct this. But certainly it'll be a step in the right direction, because your earlier comment was that the council has very intentionally allocated the resources that you had available. It's just unfortunate the resources certainly don't address any parts of this problem in a very deliberate way, in a very large way. So it's like a little pebble in a great big pond, and you could, to be commended for the work that you have done. It's just that the needs are continually to outstrip what is actually needed to turn some of these communities in a different direction.
And last comment I have to make, this go round, this go round, is that, and you stated earlier, and I don't know if we've discussed, and again, I really apologize by having to leave, but our also desire to look at parks and recreation opportunities, to look at physical infrastructure opportunities, and hopefully to be able to create the sort of energy that those purpose-built communities here in Asheville and around the country are looking at, how to better integrate housing options with supportive services and with you know, other resources that our community needs to be a better Rocky Mount, period. So it's not just as if we're only addressing, housing is the highest priority from my perspective, but it also ties and touches everything else that a person needs to live. It's saying social determinants of health really do matter. It is human development, to coin Mayor Pro Tem's words. It's human development combined with physical capital that makes a difference in determining our future forward trajectory.
Thank you, Councilman Blightwell. Councilwoman Chris Miller.
Thank you. I wasn't sure the chat function was working.
It's working. I see you hanging.
I totally acknowledge the need for more affordable housing. when I look around Ward 7, and I won't speak to the other wards in the city, I'm looking for this public investment in housing. I don't believe there has been any. I think our shortcoming in this area and probably maybe the entire country has been an insufficient investment in capital, human capital, so that people can earn income so sufficient to do the housing, to provide the housing they need.
Thank you, Councilwoman Chris Miller. I'd like to say that as we're looking at this, and these are huge opportunities for economic development in our community, and we'll be creating needs for services. And I would hope that we would look at the training institution and opportunities we have with OIC, with the community college, to talk about how we gear up those who would be able to reinvest back into the community to build the community capacity rather than having all these services to be, exported to someone that's not really tied into our community. We know all of it may not be, but I heard Asheville say yesterday that they were cleared at 30%. That's, when we talk about 10%, right? But they said they made sure that 30% of their investment went back into the minority investment, right? And I think we need to be clear about when we say that we are clear that those investments are going back into that process without some process setting up that look like a minority investment, but really not. And I'll like to see that, but along with doing all the other stuff, I'd like to see us start training ourselves, training people in our community to meet the needs of our community, and making sure, intentional, that we're putting those dollars right back into our community in multi ways. And city manager, we could look at not only creating the inventory, but creating a supply for the inventory.
I just wanted to mention to the city manager and be clear about it that we fast track it. There's been a discussion about housing, recreation, and even infrastructure in our community for a very long time, since before 2003. And I know you mentioned about interns, if we can get them, but also if we need to hire someone to put this data together, which we already have. I mean, technically, we can just take what we have and consolidate it. I don't think it has changed that much. It's going to make a big difference. But sometimes we can study stuff to death, and if we wait too long, some of us not going to be around just to get it done. And so, you may have another leadership in the near future that may see something different than what we're trying to do, a housing bond. And so while we got the momentum and the support that you need for you to move quickly, then I don't see where, we're just looking for a timeline. I don't think we need to get anybody to do any more studying, because we got the study. We have the study. We need the information to give to the new council members and the community, consolidate it. You come back with the plan of how we're going to finance it, along with the community input, whatever the process is going to be, because we don't want to miss this time. And so I feel like if we don't move now, then we may miss that window of opportunity to get this done. Can I make one point?
Sure.
When I moved back to Rocky Mount, I remember working with Southeast Rocky Mount, and it was a Methodist church that closed down. I think that's when you
Yes.
came on later, and with Mary Warren and
Yes.
Ruth Bullock.
Clark Street, United
Clark
Methodist
Street,
Church.
right.
That's right.
On trying to provide that human capital, the training. It was just so hard to get it off the ground.
Yes.
And that's been almost 30 years
30
ago.
years ago.
We don't have another 30
We don't have
years.
another 30 years.
And so what I'm saying, we know what the problem is. We already identified the problem. Even working in South Rocky Mountain and in the Riley community and the Crosstown, working with Sue Perry, we know what the need is. We know that we are lacking those resources to help develop our people. You say human development.
Yes.
Work along with OIC, which also helps sponsor some of the Citizens Academy people here today. So we've been on the ground, the grassroots, working along with elected officials. So now is this time for us to really move on it. Because I know I don't have another 30 years, not in this role, but I would like to see this move before I leave this seat on the council.
Thank you, Councilman Knight, and I really think that acknowledge the passion of our communities to make this change without the access to the wealth and the other things that is necessary to sustain this movement. And as we do this, do acknowledge the community groups that have fought so hard without resources and without even being paid to do it, but they fought hard to do it. And that we do not bring in something else that don't look like them to try to do something that they've been doing. And I think that we need to be clear about those groups early on, and how do we empower them now to do what they've been doing by giving them access to the other things that they didn't have. And so if nothing else, we will, Dr. Angie and Dr. Valerie will recap this process for us and give us feedback on it.
Okay. So I want to do a little recap of what I thought I heard, and I also have a few questions. Okay, if that's okay.
Can we clear some of the feedback we're getting?
I heard there was a discussion, this first part of the conversation was a discussion about the research. What research do we need in order to know if we can approve the bond? And what threw me off as you were doing that, and I wanted to ask the question, is I heard the city manager asking about you all's support of the overall strategic plan, of which the bond is one part. Am I correct about that? So I went back to, maybe I missed it, because I went back to the goals of because it seemed as if the issue of research was somehow connected to what is the plan? What are we going to do? And as I read the strategic plan, and I saw a lot of information, which some folks have said, and I wondered if you have, when you read the strategic plan, council folks, what additional information would you need to approve the overall plan? Those 6 goals, I think it was, and objectives, those goals and objectives. Because those speak to setting direction. And I didn't know I know it was so much information. The mayor spoke about that. So I wondered if you take a look at, and I was thinking maybe people could do that tonight, take a look at the strategic plan again and see what information is actually there, because some of what you were discussing, I saw there, and that would help us narrow down what is it we're looking for. In addition to what you said, City Manager Rochelle, about pulling together information, but I thought there was a lot of information there. So that was one thing, is that, and I think it's true that if have information that you can use that you can address the questions, but that would be, I would opt for that versus doing more research because there is a lot of data. The second thing I heard the council saying, give us, is this idea of giving us direction, which is what you all are asking for. The city's asking for direction and they're asking for approval of those goals and objectives. You see those? I think that's important. Then specifically to the bond, they're saying you want to do more research on the bond, but that's a separate piece. And then the point came up about it taking time to build partnerships. And again, there's a tension between building partnerships and creating a long-term strategy and dealing with crises right now. And then I love the conversation moved then to housing as a form of economic development. And how do you make sure that you're capitalizing on both the human capital as well as addressing the housing needs.
Val,
Yeah.
I apologize as you are on a rhythm and sharing some great information. There is a tremendous feedback in the room. So we're going to ask you to log out of Zoom and then log back in, please.
Okay.
And we
All right.
apologize for the interruption, but we want everyone to hear this.
That's okay. That's all right. I have no problem.
Take your time.
I'll be right back.
May I respond to some of what she stated?
Yes, yes.
So on page 11, and thank you to Val for pointing us back, to action. There's a page of recommendations. And I don't know if we're ready to, in adopting the plan, we would say we adopt all the recommendations as well. And do we have enough information on all of those? Create a housing trust fund. Thank you, bro. Rocky Mount Affordable Housing Strategic Plan presentation under that tab. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, on that page, it has create a housing trust fund, create a community land trust, revise density bonus policy, increase construction of multifamily housing near transit stops, create an acquisition fund for publicly and privately owned land, create a preservation fund, eliminate eligibility requirement for accessory dwelling units, implement tax and lien foreclosures, implement receivership program, revise minimum parking requirements in residential and mixed-use developments. And this has passed a GO bond. And I think I heard us say earlier, we're considering all types of options, but these are the recommendations in this particular strategic plan. So in the spirit of Val stating, Facilitator Bats stating.
It's okay. I know, I hear you.
Okay. Facilitator Bats stating that, to adopt the plan, we still might have some questions, unresolved issues around these specific recommendations. So how do we move forward with that? I mean, you got a lot in here. How will we move forward with that? I mean, I don't know what the appetite of the whole council is. I would hate for us to get stuck on one or two, but some of these are huge items that perhaps our knowledge might not be where it needs to be in order to make a comfortable vote.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what we're looking for is whether or not it's of interest to the council for us to research these things further and then come back to you with more information. It was never our intent for you to give a yes or no affirmatively on any of the recommendations because we haven't fully flushed them out yet. But at the same time, we don't want to work on things that are not of interest to the council. So if all of these things are of interest, then we'll work on them. But if it's some that you just strictly don't waste your time, at this point, we'd like to know that as well.
I don't see anything that hinders me personally, There are things that I don't know what it means. Like, I don't know what is a receivership program. I couldn't tell you what that means. Implement tax and lien foreclosures. I have concerns, but I recognize what we need to do. Housing Trust Fund, I think I got that one. I'm good with that for me personally. Community Land Trust, we got to dig a little deep, but the concept sounds good. So my question is, in response to Ms. Batts, Dr. Batts' conversation with us, do we come out of here adopting the plan or adopting the plot process to finalize the plan? And then maybe can we have a timetable if we're still doing our process of investigating what this is and finalizing? Can we put a date certain that we work back from this, and by June, say, we have received all the elements that we need and we'll be ready to have whatever, the vote or what, I don't know what that requires. And then is there any public notice? What's our public process for input, education, that, and then feedback from the people that we're here, that we're serving, that we're representing, and we try to represent well from all of our perspectives.
Thank you, Councilman Blackwell. Dr. Batts?
Yeah. So I think you all heard me inviting you to take a look at that strategic plan, and I hear you making some action steps around that, which I'm sure Angie is capturing. I had 3 other quick points. I know we have until another guest at 2:30. I wanted the theme of acknowledging the historic inequities, acknowledging the fact that Rocky Mount, like most cities, was built with segregation, during segregation, and there was differential investment. So my father used to say, he was a school principal in Rocky Mount, he used to say, fair is not equal. Fair is not always equal. That the way that we create equity is to look at where is each neighborhood starting and what does each neighborhood need. So I just encourage you all to keep that, to keep thinking about that. And for me, that links to the issue of creating trust and developing an inclusion lens. So when I look at this strategic plan, when I say I'm looking at how 10 years from now, if I was to move to Rocky Mount, would I find housing in any neighborhood? Would there be a place I would want to live in every neighborhood? And so it leads to that question about, are we talking about mixed income neighborhoods in every part of town? So I think that's a very legitimate question. And I know from the work that I've done with other cities, some cities struggle with being willing to provide affordable housing within certain neighborhoods. And I don't know where Rocky Mount is in that, but that's certainly something we should keep thinking about. And then I think the next thing that I heard being asked was developing a timeline, which I think you're all just talking about. And then also the need to acknowledge all the community groups that have been working on this. And that leads me back to what I had said earlier, the need for you all to take the model perhaps from Asheville around making sure that you're developing trusting relationships with yourselves and with your partners. So I think those were let me just see if I had one more question, which was.
It's your tag team partner again, Dr. Val. I apologize. We're not able to resolve the issue from your logging out and logging back in. We've heard you, and I can see eagerness to respond, but we want to make sure we're hearing you clearly, and it's very distracting. So we are going to pause and shut down the entire presentation. I will text you when we are back up. That would be the same for our 2 online council members. If you all would log out, and then you'll be able to log back in once it's back up. So maybe 5 minutes, team, is that? Yes, I'm getting a nod on about 5 minutes. So, and I'll text you, Val. And to our guests, we do apologize, but we want you to hear this. Yes, let's take a stretch break. Thank you.